Yeah, it's been kind of a crazy year, and during the year, I've been in flux in my own relationship and in life, and we have called upon Dawni to to help us sort through some stuff, and it's been phenomenal. It's been really, really helpful, especially things like talking about your core values, knowing what our core values were, and how to work our lives together in that manner. But and that's what we've had you on here before to talk about core values. But there's been some changes on your end as well.
Correct. Yes.
So what's the big change here?
Well, so been doing that work for 14 years. And in the last couple of years, what I was calling core values had become probably 90% of my business. Everything from working with individuals, their businesses, because I'm an entrepreneurial coach, teams, sales teams, couples like you guys. And what I kept running into was, I would say, people are like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a core values expert. It turns out that most people think they already know their core values. Uh-huh. And there was a lot of confusion using that terminology. First of all, there's work out there, current work people are doing, calling core values. That's not what it is that I'm doing.
Right.
And the other thing is they were conflating values with principles.
Okay.
And that's not at all what I meant. So I'm in the middle of writing a book about it.
Nice.
And I have an amazing co-author, Kristen Ulmer. She's phenomenal. And I have a whole team of people working on this book. And together as a team, we decided we have to come up with other terminology for what it is I'm doing. Mm. And because one of the main ideas behind what I do is we're looking for what drives you.
Right.
And we're looking for what you were born with, so what's innate. So we've changed the lingo to innate drivers.
Innate drivers.
Okay. So, and it shortens really to ID, right? This is your ID. So one of the things I say when I'm speaking to a group is, these are your innate drivers, but they're also like your inherent devotions, your internal delights. There's so many things that, have that ID behind them as the initials, but innate drivers, and it's so much more accurate to what it is I'm talking about. Even when I tell the origination story, which I think maybe I should do today, even though some of your listeners have heard it, but I'll just kind of briefly, it really does go into what it is that individually drives a human being. Okay. So, just the story. I like to start out, especially if I'm speaking to a large group and I want them to know who I am very quickly. I will say, I don't mean to brag, but I have completed 3 marriages. So
completed.
Kind of an overachiever here. So just so you know, far from perfect. And that in and of itself, it has led me to this work I do. Mm-hmm. But I was on that 3rd lovely marriage with my husband, and he had come to me pretty quickly into the marriage. We had a 2-year-old together, and I had 3 children from my first marriage who were older. And he did the whole "we need to talk." And I could tell how serious it was. And so just the 2 of us in the house had gotten the 2-year-old tended probably by you.
Yeah,
now that I'm really thinking about it, I bet you anything she was at your house.
Probably, yeah.
Still waiting for her to ask me if you're her real daddy, but that's a different conversation. Anthony and I have known each other for a long time.
Boy, over 30 years.
And
35 years.
Yeah, so it's been it's been a hot minute. And Anthony really has been essential in helping me raise my youngest. Just his son and her were friends, and anything you guys would do, you'd invite her.
Yeah.
And so grateful for that, and so grateful for our friendship.
Yeah, me too.
You're my favorite. You're my favorite.
All right.
So back to the conversation I was having with him. So here's this man. Here I am, married for the 3rd time. So dedicated to this marriage, so feeling like I have to make it work. It's like my last chance.
Right.
This is what I call the redemption marriage. No pressure.
None at all.
If I'm going to do anything good with my life, I have to at least be married to someone I have a child with. And so he comes to me, says, I'm miserable, which I knew.
Yeah.
And this was the part that started. So in one night, I had 3 huge shocks, epiphanies that changed my life. So the first one was, he said, I'm miserable and I want a divorce. So not shocked that he was miserable, shocked that he was asking for a divorce.
Right.
Because you know him, he's a certain kind of a person, and he's someone who really wants to succeed in life, wants to accomplish,
Right.
likes a life to be a certain way, and does not want to fail.
Right.
And I just want to say, as I'm going forward to talk about him for a minute, A, I have his permission to talk about him. And B, this is nothing I'm about to say as a criticism or a judgment of him as a human being.
Right.
We were 2 very incompatible people trying to make it work.
Yeah.
So I was so shocked that he was asking for a divorce that instantly I knew there was a piece to the puzzle I was not seeing and not aware of. So that was the first kind of epiphany. The second one came when I said, I did the things so many people do when they feel defensive or shocked or upset, and that's that I defended myself by listing my virtues or what I saw as my virtues. How, like, I get it, we're miserable, but how could you possibly want to divorce me? I'm amazing. Okay.
I mean, you are, but
Thank you. I
that's pretty
appreciate that.
braggadocious right there.
But that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, so in my first marriage, to someone you also know.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I broke up with you for him.
You broke up with me for him.
And, you know, both of these were long-term relationships. This isn't like me skipping around every couple of years. And I thought that I had learned my lesson in how to be a good wife.
Right.
I took it very seriously what did not work in that marriage. And I thought, okay, I can be better in this marriage and fix it.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, how could you want to divorce me? The house is spotless. The bills are paid. The kids are happy. I'm loving. I'm affectionate. I ask you how your day was. Like, I did all this. And
Right.
this is a moment that is just burned into my memory because he's, my ex is a pretty intimidating kind of guy. He's a big guy.
That's fair to say that.
Fair to say that, right? And again, not a criticism of that. In fact, I think he's actually proud of that.
Yeah.
And he, not in a scary way. I didn't feel afraid, but he was so frustrated. And I remember him standing up and kind of towering over me and saying, I would trade all of that for some security.
Huh.
And that was the second moment of the night. And again, this is the big one. I mean, my whole life changed in that moment. My whole body got cold. Time stood still. Just talking about it right now. I mean, that was in 2009.
Yeah.
I get chills all over my body. I have them right now because I had already been working as a coach for 7 years at this point.
Right.
And, you know, kind of part-time because I was still a photographer, but very much into the self-help world. And what happened for me in that moment was not just a click about him. Mm-hmm. It was a click that we're all driven by different things.
Right. Right.
Now, that sounds so basic and so almost infantile but it was where you realize things to the very core, to my cells realized it. I was like, oh, whoa. He cares so much about security, which he's clearly not getting in the way he needs it, that a man who would normally never get divorced
Right.
is now asking for a divorce. Mm-hmm. And I think the real serious, the gravity of the situation is what led me to see it fully. And so in that moment, I knew I had an understanding that we're driven by some things that we would live and die for.
Right.
These are the things that would have you leave your family. You know, these are the things that would have people never talk to a parent again, or move across the country, or walk away from millions of dollars, or, you know, like
Right.
they're that big of a deal. This isn't a superficial conversation.
Right.
And so what happened at the time, here we are in the middle of the fight, and I kind of put that information aside because I'm in the middle of my whole life being torn apart. And I say to him, okay, you want a divorce? You've got it, because I'm miserable too. And now, even though he had just asked for a divorce, it's his turn to be offended and upset. Mm-hmm. And he proceeds to list his virtues and the ways he thinks he's showing up. Right? And it was largely about money. It was like, I make good money. I'm good with money. I take care of our finances. And the whole time he's talking, and again, I don't want to dismiss any of his contributions or anyone who's listening to this if this is how you see yourself. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, in my head, I'm like, yeah, don't give a shit about that. Didn't get married for that. Nope, don't care about that.
Right.
And it's not that I didn't care at all. It's just that
it wasn't a high priority.
It wasn't a high priority. It's not what had me get married.
Right.
And this was the third epiphany of the night. I was like, oh no. Oh dear. We got married for different reasons. Because then I said to him, I would trade all of that for some connection.
Wow.
Oh shit. I got married for connection. He got married for security.
Right. That's not necessarily compatible. It's not incompatible, but
yeah, it's not the same.
Right. Definitely not.
So for those of you listening, like, oh no, my spouse and I are different. That's not really the point. Mm-hmm. The point is that it was subconscious and we weren't fully seeing what was driving each one of us individually, internally. Right. So then...
Sorry.
That's okay. So the next day, and I, jokingly say that after we had decided to stay married for another 7 years, accidentally, woo, don't pretend you haven't done it. Anyway, that I was like, okay, you said something yesterday. You said you would trade everything I offer for some security. And I have to say that actually makes no sense to me because, again, our house is clean. Our bills are paid. We have money in savings. I'm a emotionally stable person.
Right.
And he said, I did not say stability. I said security. And what I mean by that is, first and foremost, I want you to work a W-2 job. Exactly.
Sheesh. That's something I don't think I could ever do
Well,
again.
no. I mean, like the list of things I would do before working a W-2 job. We won't get into this on the family-friendly show, but just about anything before I would go work for someone else. Like, I do consider myself to be psychologically unemployable. So if someone says, you have to take your lunch at a certain time, I'm like, are you joking? I will eat when I need to eat.
Right.
If I need to take a day off or a week off, I will do that. And I mean, I've been an entrepreneur since I was a child, doing little businesses since I was 7. So what it turned out that he meant by security was like predictability.
Yeah.
Certainty.
Yeah.
And although I'm consistent, I am neither predictable nor certain. And in my opinion, that's not something, like, we don't live in a realm that offers much certainty.
Sure.
So, but I also don't care about it. I'm a risk taker.
Yeah.
And I will be happy to make only $1,000 in 1 month and make $8,000 the next month.
Right.
That's no problem for me.
Yeah, you can make that work.
If I got to make a pot of chili and eat that all month, I'm fine with that.
Right. You're not irresponsible with money.
Yeah.
You just don't always have it flowing in like a regular job.
And I'm totally fine with that. Right. So in understanding him deeper, it turns out that his number one, the word he uses for it, is comfort. And it's not just comfort like, I want a good mattress, although that too. But it's comfort like, I want to know that I can be comfortable now and later.
Yeah.
And that is what drives him. And I was pushing against that and threatening that in so many different ways by the risks I was taking. I know you can relate to this, Anthony.
I'm like, I see my relationship in this same conversation.
Exactly. So what what ended up leading from there was this. I threw myself into the research of what at the time I was calling core values. But what I saw in the research is that there's a lot that proves that we're actually born with what we value. Again, you guys, I'm not talking about principles,
Right.
Not what we believe,
Right.
but what we value. In other words, what holds meaning for us in our lives.
Yeah.
It's what we really, when we're aligned with our drivers and we're living a life where they are at the forefront and they're in a balanced way, then we are thriving. We feel satisfied. We feel peaceful. We feel like we're on purpose and like our life has meaning.
Yeah.
But if those are always being threatened, okay? So in this case with my ex, I was threatening his comfort. And that's only one thing I was threatening, because his third one is respect. And I was constantly threatening that, because that's not something I honestly even think about.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
If I have to say something, I'm going to say it.
Right.
And maybe it doesn't come across super respectful and I don't care, but he does care. Right? So I was threatening him, but my driver of connection, which ended up being my number 2, but that was threatened for me because he didn't connect in the same way that I feel connection.
Right.
So this is not just a word. This is everything that goes under that word. It's a world.
Yeah.
Right? So if I say connection, well, when I was in my 20s and, knew you then, it was like attention, big groups,
Right.
parties, fun. That's what connection meant to me.
Right.
Now, in my 50s, connection is largely one-on-one or small groups, depth, full presence.
Right. Right. Right.
Like, I want the eye contact. I want the talking about what really matters to us. I want the real. It's authentic.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
There's an intimacy to it. And at the time, I didn't feel I was getting that in my marriage. So here I am feeling unwell. There he is feeling unwell.
Yeah.
And with all the couples I've worked with over the years, this is what it comes down to. This is what it comes down to.
Right.
I'm driven by this. I care about this. This is what holds meaning for me. And then the other person. Now, you guys, this isn't just your romantic partner.
Right. No.
Right? This is a child.
Right.
This is a
One-on-one.
parent. This is a friend. This is your sibling, your boss, your coworker. When you see things fall apart, one of the things I do in my business is conflict resolution. And I don't have a single incident where it does not come down to people being unaware of what drives them and what they value, what drives the other person, and honoring that. Because sometimes people are aware, but they're not honoring it.
Right. And that's a huge component of all of this.
Yes.
Is to know what your partner's values are, to know what their drivers are for what, rules their world. And if you don't speak that language, if you don't, address that to meet their needs, then you're going to have a disconnect.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Right? Even for people who have like pretty good marriages, I can always tell how someone's marriage is going the second they sit down with me and I'm like, how is your marriage going? And their tone of voice tells me everything I need to know. Right. Well, I'm like, so shitty then. Okay, got it. Because when things are going well, they're like, actually, it's going really good. And usually there'll be another sentence. There's also something else going on. So you can even have a good relationship and still there's a way that it could be much deeper and much more satisfying. It's important to us as human beings to feel known.
Yeah.
And when someone who is close to you, particularly a parent or a spouse, says something to you that shows you that they don't get you at all, the disconnect is immediate.
Right. Right.
Like, how would you accuse me of this thing? You must not know me at all.
Right.
Right. One of the things in my work I do largely with couples, but with any, group of people or two people together, is how devastating accusations are.
Ooh, yes.
So I actually create a ground rule that there will be no accusations. And it's because it threatens what drives a person. It makes you feel unknown to this person. It's one thing to be accused by someone who barely knows you. And you kind of go, oh, you don't know me.
You don't know me. It's fine. Yeah.
But when someone
who you care about is supposed to know you.
Exactly. It is absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
So with this whole idea of innate drivers and how deep it is in you. So this is like not coming from your conditioning. It can be informed by your conditioning or your trauma, right? It could pull it in the shadow.
Right.
So if I care about connection, which I do, and then I have a childhood where, whatever, like I'm neglected or I'm abused or traumatized, that could pull it into the shadow of connection. It won't make me stop caring about connection. This is how we know these are innate, because nothing stops them. It just pulls it into the shadow. Well, like, what's the shadow of connection? Like, it could be promiscuity, which is not a direction I ever went because of other reasons, but it can be inappropriately connecting, which I absolutely did. Anything from like affairs to emotional affairs to neediness, codependence.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So they're all still in the realm of connection. They're just the imbalanced version of it.
Right.
But nothing would ever stop me from craving and needing and desiring and thriving with connection. And you can probably, those of you who are listening, could probably think right now, whether you're like that or someone you know is like that, like, oh. So as I'm growing up and my parents, who are both introverts, are trying to understand me, and they just think, social butterfly, can't stay away from her friends. There's like some judgment there.
Sure.
Well, that's because that's not what drives them.
Right. So they're making judgments versus like trying to understand you.
And that's what we do, don't we?
Right. Yeah.
Like you have two sons.
Yeah.
Both of whom I know quite well.
Yeah.
And they are quite different from each other.
Yeah.
And also different from you in certain aspects.
For sure.
And to know what is driving them internally is so vital and essential to a deep connection with them.
Yeah.
It's not about, so the three words I use here, whether it's your own or another's, is first there's the awareness, then there's the acceptance, and there's the aligning with. So AAA,
Triple
right?
A.
Triple A, easy to remember. Awareness, you got to know it first. Acceptance, this is where you choose to honor it, choose to accept it. You're not going to try to change them. And alignment with, so if that's your own, you build a life that's aligned with what drives you and what you value. If it's another's, you align the relationship there. Meaning, like for instance, with my mom, we don't have very much in common, right? I love and admire her, but we have some pretty fundamental differences.
Yeah.
But my third innate driver is legacy. And she is also very driven by legacy. So we align there. So our conversations are largely about that.
Okay.
Which creates connection
Sure.
where it actually exists.
Right. Not a
Instead
fake
of-
connection.
Not a fake connection.
Yeah.
Look where you actually align and have the core of the relationship be there. And with someone who's not your romantic partner, this is much easier to do. You do want some more compatibility with the person that you actually live with, sleep with, share money, raise children, right? But for the other people in your lives, even for the inner circle, find where you align and actually focus there. And it's amazing what's possible at that point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's that's really interesting to hear that. I mean, I've been going through, my own set of difficulties, and it is central around the triple A's. I mean, whenever there's difficulty, it's because I'm not not aligning with her. I'm not.
Sometimes not aware.
Yeah, that's most of it right there, honestly, is being aware of it. Right.
I know, I have a husband with ADHD, right? It's
Yeah.
just like there's this type of noticing that sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't. So it has to start with the awareness.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Which also implies understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So I've talked so much. I want to hear your experience with innate drivers in your own life.
Well, I mean, I know for me, it's all about like autonomy. I need to have my autonomy to do my own thing. I don't always make the best choices, but I at least catch it. And when I catch myself not living up to, what I want to do, I'll make my decisions to stop doing poor behaviors or whatever else. And I need that. Like, I don't want somebody else telling me what to do or how to do it. I'm like, I'll take suggestions and I'm open to criticism. I'm as an actor, that's something that I have to be good at, is taking criticism and using
feedback.
Right.
Yes.
Feedback. Yeah. How to, more like a critique rather than criticism, but how to use that and to turn it into something better that, is better than what I thought would have been. So I'm open to that, but I don't like to be told what to do. And that's really a hard thing to do. Although it's funny because at times I think my wife is like, why do I have to tell you what I need you to do? And, like around the house. And it's like, oh, because I don't think that has anything to do with my innate values. It has everything to do, or my innate drivers. It has everything to do with being a guy, really. I think there is something to that.
There's a huge something to that. But yes, so you have autonomy as one of your innate drivers, and I know you have expression.
Yes. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
how does expression show up for you as a driver?
So as an actor, I have to be on stage. I mean, it's or at least performing in some way or another, right? And I think about what I can deliver to an audience, what I can deliver to people who are in my circle, and I'm all about like trying to stand out that way and be excellent. And in fact, sometimes that's a detriment to things too, where I've learned how to let go of trying to be perfect. As I've said numerous times on the podcast, my best motto that's got me through things is "done is the new perfect." But that doesn't stop me from really trying to be excellent when I am expressing myself.
Yes.
I demand a high level of performance from myself. I just finished doing a play, for example, called Clue, and it was unlike anything I've ever done before. But the challenge in that was knowing where my lines are, right? Because I've never been in a show where everybody's all on stage at the same time, and I may have like 2 pages of no dialogue, and then on the 3rd page, I have 1 sentence that I have to put in the middle of everyone else's. And it was like the first time I had to memorize basically the entire show. And we were in rehearsal and they wanted us to be completely off book. And if you didn't remember your line, you had to call out line. So the first time we did that, I must have called line, I don't know, at least 20, 25 times. And that's ridiculous. Like any time in the past where I've been in a show where we've been off book, I've maybe had to call line once, maybe once. But this was so crazy because it was, like I said, a line in the middle of a bunch of other things. And then I'd forget, like, oh, I'm starting to think about, what is my motivation and what is all this other stuff, and then I'd like completely lose what my line is.
I just want to point out real quick here, too, with you having a driver of autonomy, this would have been uncomfortable for that piece of things because you are now massively part of a team, and what you're doing depends on what everyone else is doing.
Oh, yeah.
So that wouldn't have come totally naturally to you.
No, I mean, it does as an actor. I've developed that skill, but I was so frustrated with myself at the end of that rehearsal. I was so mad at myself. I beat myself up more than anybody ever could. I mean, I'd gotten, people like, the director was like, you guys have to get off book. And I'm like, I know. I was so mad. I'm like, yeah, I know. But luckily, the director recognized I wasn't the only one struggling, which was great. The cast was amazing. It was great working with all these people. I completely trusted them and wanted to work with them. But he finally was like, okay, you guys can have your books. You can have your books while you're running through this. And And that was the best thing he could have done, honestly, because then because I wasn't the only one struggling with this. Everyone else called for line numerous times. And then once we were all like given the chance to hang on to our scripts, I think maybe that was a little bit of autonomy there too, right?
Yes,
like I need to hang on to this. And I only needed it, the first time we do it, I used it. The second time we did, I'd like maybe look at it every once in a while. And the third time we did it, I didn't need the script anymore. And it catered to my sense of autonomy by letting me hang on to my book, and it catered to my expression by being able to do what I wanted to do.
By serving your so this is such a good example, because every single world, these 3 worlds that we're speaking to, there are so many things that serve that world, right? Yeah. So the word is expression, but there will be all these things underneath that word, like communication, clarity, understanding, whatever those things are for you to be able to have that expression.
Yeah.
Safety, trust. I mean, I could go on and on with what could be in that world. And because you and I have done this work together, I know what's in that world for you.
Yeah.
But it's very individualized. We could have 5 people in this room who all have an innate driver of expression, and it will mean different things.
Right.
To every single one of them.
Right.
Right. So it's not just like, oh, this is the word. It's like, okay, but describe for me the world, what serves it and what threatens it.
Right.
Right? Because anything that threatens any of those words, any of those energies will threaten that whole entire world.
Yeah. Well, here's a good example with Clue. As we were going along in the rehearsal process, I'm developing my character, and I'm developing the voice that he uses and his mannerisms and all this other stuff. And so as we're rehearsing, I'm delivering these lines kind of in a laissez-faire type of way, but it's what my character, I think, would do. And after one of the rehearsals, the director came up to me and he was like, I love your character. I love your voice. I think that's great too. Can you speed it up a little bit? And I was threatened. Here he is threatening my autonomy
and your expression
and my expression. And I've, as an actor, I have to know how to take direction, like I said, but also sometimes I have to feel like I have to put my foot down on what it is I'm trying to do. You cast me for a reason. You wanted me in the show for a reason. Let me do what I do best. And so at first I was like, I can speed it up. I'm just playing around right now. I'm just trying to feel it out. And he was like, oh, okay. And I said, I understand that you kind of want it faster and all that other stuff, but I'm also trying to play to the comedy of this show. And I know a lot about comedy.
Timing
of things. Yes. It's a science. It really is a science. And I'm like, I get it. But I'm just trying to figure out where those moments are. And I'm just playing around with that. And he was like, oh, okay. And then the next day he came up and he apologized. He was like, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. I know you're a professional. I know you'll figure this out, and whatever. So just do what you're doing and we'll work through that. And I was like, oh, wow. That was great. And then we were, like I said, we were doing the speed. We were reading through with holding our scripts in our hands. And he was like, okay, this time when we do it, I want you all to go as fast as you can. Like, just read your lines as fast as you can so that it kind of lets it sink in. He gave us a different reason than the actual reason.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To let it sink in. So just deliver it really fast and then see how fast we can get through this whole show. And we're like, oh, okay. And so we're going and we're zooming so fast that some of the people in the cast are older and they're having a hard time keeping up with the pace of it, but they're trying and they get lost sometimes and it slows everything down. And then we pick it up and we go again. And we get done, and it was the fastest we'd ever done the whole thing. And he goes, that is how fast I want the whole show to go all the time. And we're like, what? That's crazy. That's insanely fast. And he was like, well, that's what I want you to be thinking in your head, is to go that fast. So because he had presented it in a way that wasn't threatening.
Yeah, right.
I actually saw his vision. What is it that he wants? He's the director. He has a whole vision of what he wants this show to be. And for me to listen to that and to take that into consideration is me considering, and I don't know what his core values were.
His drivers, yeah.
I don't know what his innate drivers were.
I mean, that's the thing is if he's driven by something like, fun or creativity or something, that will show up in a way.
Yeah.
It's part of the fun of this is to try to at least think about what somebody else's drivers are.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when I realized that was what he was striving for, I was like, okay, I can get on board with that and still do what I do. And by the end, like, we didn't have an intermission with that show. It was 85 minutes. It was a bullet train. It was a roller coaster ride that was just nonstop chaos and craziness. And we all finally got to that point and got on board. And the show was brilliant. It was like the second highest selling show at that theater since they've opened. And word of mouth just got around. People were like, this is insane. The director went to Broadway for a while and was working on Broadway. And he had some friends come here to Salt Lake to see the show. And they went and saw a show at the Hale Center Theater, which is, an amazing theater, and it's a spectacle. The stage is almost a character in itself there. And they went and saw a show there, and they're like, wow, this is amazing theater. There's so many cool technologies and, lighting and sound. Oh my gosh, this would be cool to do a show here because of all the space. And then they came and saw our show, which is not an amazing stage at the time. It was the acting. And they sat in the audience and they were like, oh my gosh, I want to do something like that. And so for me, that was like, that was awesome to hear. It was inspiring to be like, okay, we all kind of melded into what each of us needed.
Yes. So you're speaking to something that's a huge piece of this work, and I call it harmonization.
Okay.
So when you're able to take different driving forces and harmonize them to the highest degree. So, this often does show up in a marriage where... So I'm going to give an example from my own life. So my number one innate driver is workability, and that turned out to be more important to me than connection. Actually, that's not the right way to say it. It's not that it's more important. It's that it's prerequisite. Mm-hmm. So first for me, I need like ease, order, flow, organization, simplicity. These are the things that I mean when I say workability. So my husband, Gideon, just so you guys all know, 4 times a charm, in case you were wondering. Very, very, very happily married to someone I'm extremely compatible with. His number one is creation. He is a creator, right? Like for a living, he's a photographer, videographer, a brilliant one. He makes things, he builds things, he fixes things. Well, we have a garage full of stuff. And when we first moved in together, he had stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, my darling, I understand that creation is your number one and that workability is my number one. So instead of compromising and having us both be miserable, I want to harmonize this. And you just ask the right question. How do we create workability and keep creation flowing? So what we have done is that all of his stuff is either in the garage or his office.
Yeah.
It does not come anywhere else in our home. And that is a harmonization for us.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't want to take away his creation. That would be devastating to him, and he'd honestly lose all interest in me eventually, because that's what drives him. Mm-hmm. But I have to keep my workability as well. And then what you get is 2 healthy people who are working together. So any 2 innate drivers can be harmonized, but it takes them both moving into the balanced version of themselves. So in the balanced version of workability, I'm not freaking out. I'm not type A. I'm not controlling. I'm not stressy. I'm just like looking for the flow.
Yeah.
In the balanced version of creation, he's not hoarding. He's not putting everything everywhere, right?
Right.
So when you bring them both into the light, is the way I put it, although that sounds a little woo, then there's this beautiful harmony that happens. So then, okay, something needs to be fixed in the house. I guarantee you Gideon's got what it needs to fix it.
Right, right.
He's going to go out to that garage, and he's going to find the thing and create workability for me through creation. And that's sort of like this penultimate example of this collaboration between the drivers.
Yeah, yeah.
But what it takes is not just bringing the thing into the light. It takes the desire and the willingness to work together.
Yeah.
Right? So number 2 for me is connection. Number 2 for him is sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar to your autonomy.
Right.
He has to own himself, his time, his schedule, his way of doing things. Well, here I am trying to get connection. He's trying to get sovereignty. But as the details came forth of what that looks like, there's not an actual push against. What there is an honoring. So the example I give with this one is family reunion. So I have a huge family, right? There's 68 of us from my parents on down.
Whew.
I know. And we are going to, have this big, huge reunion up at a ranch. So I approach it honoring his drivers. Mm-hmm. Okay. So Gideon's drivers in order are creation, sovereignty, and growth. So first off, how I approach it. Gideon, the retreat or the reunion, the family reunion is the first week of July. If you choose to go, okay, just those words.
Right.
If you choose to go, instantly honoring his sovereignty.
Right.
If you choose to go, I was thinking that we could bring up some of your photography stuff and you could do some shoots in a new terrain. We've never been up there before. Growth. Mm. Novelty is a huge piece of growth for him. Mm-hmm. Doing something new, having a new background for his product shots, that type of thing. Right? So I have now, in 2 sentences, honored creation, sovereignty, and growth.
Right.
For him.
Right.
Now, he's completely enrolled. Yes, absolutely. That sounds wonderful. Now, he's off thinking of all the things he's going to bring to the family reunion.
Right.
Okay. Well, guess what? And I now have workability because he's coming with me and he's going to drive on these back roads and he's going to do the parts that I don't love to do, which is part of workability for me. I have connection. He'll be there. At the very least, he'll be sleeping next to me every night.
Right.
And I get legacy because I get to go be with my whole family at this family reunion.
Right. And he's going to probably have some photos to add to your legacy or whatever.
And big time.
Yeah.
Oh, and they're amazing.
Yeah.
Right? This is a true story. This isn't a hypothetical. This actually happened last July. So it's when you speak someone's language, it's not about manipulation.
No.
My agenda was pure. I was 100% okay if he said, I don't want to come.
Right.
So when you remove agenda and you speak to what someone else cares about, you speak their language, it's not manipulation, it's honor.
Yeah. That's,
right?
That's a solid word to use there. It
is. You're really honoring. I'm honoring that my marriage has 6 drivers. Mm-hmm. It's in my marriage. And when Trinity, who still lives with us, is with us, she's with us half the time, then it has 9.
Right.
So that's just, and one of Trinity's is freedom. Her number 2 is freedom. Gideon's number 2 is sovereignty. So I know that to connect with them, I honor that first and foremost, whether it's my 15-year-old daughter or my grown-ass husband. Do you see what I mean?
Right.
So this is not a simple conversation. I know it's kind of hard to give it its justice in a podcast, but this is something that I have seen literally heal relationships on the deepest level. And not just between 2 people, whole entire teams.
Yeah.
Companies that were going under, where all the employees felt so misunderstood. Huh. If you see why people leave a job, it's almost always that what drives them, what they value has been totally threatened and dismissed. Okay. If I owned a company, the very first thing I would do would be this work. Right. I would have written down what every single person I worked with who worked for me, everything, what drives them.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to speak to them in a way and you're going to provide the opportunities that give them that thing. Otherwise, they will leave.
Right.
And we both know what it costs a company to replace someone.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy.
In some of these higher level positions, it can cost upwards of $1 million to replace somebody.
Yeah. Ugh.
When you could have just spoken their language and honored what it is that's driving them and that they value.
Yeah. And in a business, that's certainly what you need to have working out there, and especially in any relationship, really, it's so important to see all that. I mean, I'm still learning, right? And this is the other thing I wanted to say and share on this particular episode is that you may know what your significant other's innate drivers are. You may know what yours are, but it does take work.
Yes.
And it does take a level of understanding and always trying to look at it in terms of their values and what is it that makes you happy too. Because if you don't find that connection, if you don't find that harmonization,
yep.
then you're not going to have a successful situation.
It's not sustainable.
It's not. Yeah. I mean, and in my marriage, I don't think about the future. I don't think about, what I'm going to do when I'm retired or how I'm going to survive and all that stuff. I'm always about the present. I'm more about now and how can I have what I need now and how can I accomplish something now and express myself now and all that other stuff. My spouse does not live in the now like as much as I do. She lives in the future. She's always thinking about, making sure she has security, like
stability, security, legacy.
Yeah. And so we butt heads there a lot of times. Luckily, I've started to understand this. I'm doing the work. I see where it is that I need to connect on her level and make sure she knows that I'm on board with her and that I understand her concerns. And so like I'm self-employed and she is the W-2 worker and we just did our taxes and she was putting all her stuff in, all her numbers in TurboTax, and she saw that she was going to get about a $10,000 return. I am self-employed. I don't have money taken out for taxes like she does. And I take a lot of deductions and expenses and all that other stuff to whittle down what I owe.
I understand this conversation.
Yeah. And so we get to end of me putting all my information in to TurboTax, and we're only getting like a $2,000 return.
Yep.
Right?
I was going to say, I'm paying $8,000 this year. So it's a different ballgame.
And she's like, I was thinking about all these things I was going to do with that $10,000 and some of the stuff that I wanted to have happen. And then I watched it go down to nothing. Actually, it went in the negative. We owed because I hadn't done all my deductions yet.
Right.
And she was like, oh my gosh, what would I get into? And so at the end of all that, she was like, look, I get that you work the way you work. I get it. But for my peace of mind, can you start socking money away that would pay for taxes if you had to? Can you just like put it in and I usually do. I have some money. Like I told her, I'm like, if we owe, I'll pay it. Don't worry about it.
No, but you're saying, okay, this is a perfect example of harmonization because you work in a certain way. You get this autonomy, you get this expression, and she works in a certain way. She needs that stability, that security. So that's a perfect solution because that's what we do. Mm-hmm. I put a certain amount percentage. So I have it sitting there.
Yeah.
So when I, write out that check, because apparently to the government it's 1991, or whatever that is, then I have it. So that is a perfect example of harmonization. No person in a dynamic should be sacrificing what it is they care about most.
Yeah.
No, that's not a loving thing to do to ourselves, and it's certainly not a kind and loving thing to do to another.
Yeah.
Right? I am convinced of this. I am convinced that there is a way that we can create collaboration with people with huge differences. And usually the harmonization is actually something higher and more beautiful and expansive than each individual person would do on their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really beautiful when you see, I've done this work for full families. Can you imagine, those of you listening, can you imagine if your parents understood you on this level? If you understood your parents on this level? If you have a child that you're estranged from or that's just very angry with you all the time, this is not a blame conversation. There's a good chance that you do not understand what drives them. And you're doing the thing that so many of us do, which is putting your own drivers and values onto another human being.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like you think, oh, well, I'm driven by connection. They must be, and they must just be really bad at it. We just think people are really bad at things.
Right.
Instead of understanding they're playing a whole different game.
Yeah. They're not playing the same game as you.
They're playing a totally different game.
Yeah.
And so it's not, I have to tell this to people, because we live in Utah. And sometimes I have to let people know, especially when I'm doing retreats and stuff, I want you guys all to know I'm not LDS and bad at it. I'm just not LDS. So
It's a difference
when
there,
you see me drinking my coffee and swearing like a sailor, just know that I don't see either of those things as a negative thing.
Right.
Right. So it's like to let people know, look, I'm driven by these things.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a parent who's driven by obedience and you're a child who's driven by creativity or autonomy or whatever, there could possibly be a breakdown there unless you understand and honor.
Yeah.
Right? There's the awareness, the acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's huge when it comes to parent-child relationships.
Right. It's a serious give and take, which is any kind of adult relationship. There's got to be some give and take. And kids have a hard time knowing what that give and take is unless you spell it out for them, unless you lay it out.
Absolutely. I let Trinity know, like, so Trinity, remember that I really value workability. Mm-hmm. So I know that is probably 147th on your list, if that. But again, what that looks like is, so here I have this child who has love and freedom and creativity as her drivers. If I did not understand that, and love is a very broad word, if I didn't understand what she meant by love,
right, what her specific
that means, we would be in a lot of trouble during these teenage years.
Yeah.
Instead, we've been able to keep a very strong, and like I even call it a sacred connection. She's one of my favorite human beings because I get her and I honor her. It doesn't mean we don't have moments of frustration, but we have language for it.
Yeah.
I can say to her, Trinity, I understand that freedom is huge for you. And how do we create workability for me and freedom for you? And we ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And just for your children, just you caring what they value rather than just trying to put yours onto them is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in a conundrum right now with my son in the same kind of thing. I am trying to create a workable situation that we both can be in harmony with, where it's like, look, I need these things from you to give you what you need. If you want this and this and this, I need you to do this and this and this. So that we can work that out and be okay with it. And it's a difficult task.
It's a process. It's especially a process with someone who doesn't have a full frontal lobe.
Yes.
And so but one of the things to look for here, kids are one thing, but if you have, for instance, a spouse or a partner who doesn't care about yours, they have no interest in finding out what drives you or listening as you communicate that or what you value, that in and of itself is a red flag.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talk a lot about narcissists, but that is one of the things that's so difficult to collaborate with a narcissist is that
they don't care about your...
They genuinely don't.
They don't care what drives you.
So then what will happen is you'll be trying to honor, understand, align with theirs. They won't care about yours. And it's one-sided. It's one-sided. There's no harmonization, you guys. I cannot stress this enough. There's no harmonization when it's one-sided.
Yeah.
That takes two people who are willing, who are open. And you guys, it's hard conversations. Like I look at the conversations that Gideon and I have really been faced with. They're no joke.
Yeah.
But the level of intimacy we have, because we are not just willing to seek this information, like Gideon is actually trained to do this work. He cares so much about it that he's like, train me, teach me how to do this work.
Yeah.
So his passion is working with people who struggle with addiction. Are you kidding me? This work for people who struggle with addiction, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
And he was humble enough to come to his wife and say, teach me more about this. He's been living it in his own personal life for years. But how beautiful is that there's that vulnerability and that humility to come to your spouse and say, let's work through everything we need. Now, this is only one podcast. I would love to come back and talk about the wound piece because how we sabotage ourselves is its own thing, isn't it?
Yes. And in fact, that honestly, I know my wife has talked to you about this too, but the wound piece is so simple and yet so powerful.
I know.
So powerful.
I know.
It has completely changed how we interact with each other. It has completely changed our understanding of one another, understanding what that wound is. We should have you back and do
I would
a whole
love
one
to
on
do a
that
part 2 because I know,
Yeah.
like you and I, especially just from our past and our connection, we could probably go on forever. But I think that just the basic understanding, this is what I would want all the listeners to hear, that you are driven by something and so deep.
Mm-hmm.
And when you stop fighting it, you bring that awareness and you bring that acceptance. So you're not saying I shouldn't be this way.
Uh-huh.
You're literally saying I am this way and I'm going to work on being the healthiest version of this.
Yeah.
But this is who I am. This is what I care about and I'm going to be a stand for that. And you bring that same honor to others, especially those in your inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
What is then possible is unlimited. It is, I have seen miracles in the, I'm giving examples in the book that I'm writing that bring me to tears every single time I speak of them.
Yeah.
Because what I see happen in the healing of relationship, in the honoring of another human being, it's the medicine for this narcissistic society that we're living in. It's that big of a deal, right?
Right.
So a lot of people are like, okay, well, what do I do next? It's like, well, the book will come out next year.
I need a copy of that.
You can always go to my website, DawniAngel.com, for a one-on-one session, which I don't know how much longer I'll be doing, but for a training, like I do retreats, I'm doing mastermind on this at the end of the summer. There's always ways, but in the meantime, just on your own, start talking about it.
Yeah.
Think about it for yourself. What drives me? What do I value? What creates meaning in my life?
Yeah.
And talk to the people close to you. Get curious. Get open. Don't just make assumptions.
Right. If you don't, because you may not even know what yours are, and other people who are around you can see it, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, you're more into, you want to express yourself all the time." Not all the. Well, okay, yeah, I guess I do. And then you're like, all right, okay, that's one of mine.
It's so true.
Yeah.
When people come to me for a one-on-one session and they leave with a working theory, right? These are most likely my 3.
Mm-hmm.
Their homework assignment is to go home and share it with people that are closer to them and be open to feedback, because sometimes we don't see ourselves as clearly as we would like to think.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely an aspect of that sharing and that collaboration, but just starting the conversation can open up so many connecting and intimate places to go, especially in that close relationship, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's where I would say to start with this, because that's the question I get every time I talk about this. Well, then how do I find out mine? Like, absolutely, yeah, come see me. I would love that.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go to somebody who is less expensive than I am, I have 9 coaches that I've trained to do this work.
Nice.
All of them are great. None of them have been doing it for 14 years, right? Which is not to, it's just,
right.
That's the expertise level that you pay for, but there are people who would way rather pay less and get that, and that's great too. So I can refer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do not, this is not me coming on here as some big plug for getting more business. This is me saying, I want this information out in the world.
Yeah.
So if all you do with it to begin with is start to have the conversations, that in and of itself is very powerful and profound.
Such a huge step to changing the way that we interact with one another too. I mean, it is very, very vital. I think it's kind of lost, and I think because of that, we're all kind of lost. I was asking the question the other day. I'm like, whatever happened to discernment?
Oh dear.
And I think what happened to it is that people stopped considering each other's innate drivers. I mean, if you don't care about what drives me, then why should I care about doing this job the way you want it done?
Yeah.
Or why should I care about, getting whatever? And so there's this, I don't know what it is. It's just this desire of not caring. It's like almost nihilistic.
Yeah.
And that's what's sad, because when we do all start caring about what is important to others, or what is it that drives somebody to do what they do, then we can cater to that in a way where it's like everybody walks away happy. instead of, you know, oh,
and they
just
walk away like it's sacred. Look, this is a very vulnerable conversation, and it is a sacred thing to witness somebody's internal world and what they want for their lives more than anything. And I have no exceptions to me sitting down with someone, and I will be moved to tears, because no matter what their word is, what I'm really honored to have is this glimpse inside a human being and what they're here on earth for.
Yeah.
And it can be any word, even a word that at first glance does not, you know, appeal to me. And by the end of it, I'm just moved by what this means to another person. And I want to honor that in them.
Yeah.
I want to know what my clients deeply care about and are driven by, because then I can show up for them as a friend, as a coach, as a human, and do everything in my power to support them in that way. Here we are, all these people thinking we give more than we receive. But at the end of the day, what it is that people are giving to each other in ways that are not landing, because they're ways that are not meaningful to that person. So if what somebody would most want from you is a one-on-one in-person conversation, and you drop cookies off at their door, it's not that they don't appreciate the cookies.
Yeah.
It's that the thing that would really meet that need is the one-on-one conversation. And when we know people and we're willing to ask those clarifying questions, I have a good friend right now who has COVID, and she's very, very, very ill. And I'm like, I want to think about it. I want to really be present to what would be meaningful to her, not just convenient for me.
Right. And that's the difference. That's where everything happens. Okay, so one final question then. If the audience is out there and they're like, well, I kind of know what drives me, but I'm not really certain, what's a good resource for them to go check out until your book comes out, obviously? But do you have anything that they could do to try to like look up some things that might spark something in them, like, oh yeah, that's important to me, or that's what drives me?
So, you know, good question. So if they decide, and by the way, I can do a session with anyone anywhere, right? Because I can use Zoom or whatever. Although if you are close by, I will make you come to my house.
Yeah.
Have a cup of coffee with me, and
it's better that way anyway.
Meet my dog, and you'll love it. You'll love it. But so I'm going to give a couple of questions. I'm going to give 3 questions here they can ask themselves, and these are 3 questions I use in almost every session I do. Okay? So first question is, what do you do no matter what else is happening in your life? Okay? So besides obviously like showering, eating, outside of those survival needs, what do you do no matter what else is happening in your life? And this was actually, for me, the question I asked myself that showed me workability is my number one. Because I could see examples, for instance, when my son Boston was in ICU for 2 weeks as a baby, as a toddler, I was still driving back to West Jordan where I lived at the time and paying the bills, cleaning the house, doing the laundry, and as soon as someone else could come stay with him, like my mom, and then go back up. So even in the middle of absolute crisis,
you were always doing...
I was creating workability, right? So that's what I mean by that question. If you look at the lowest low of your life and the highest high, what are the consistent threads that go throughout your life? Okay, so that's the first question.
Okay.
Question number 2, what are you known for?
Okay.
So look at what people are describing you to somebody.
Yeah.
One of the things people always say about Dawni knows everyone, right?
Right. Yep.
Like that's one way I'm described. Okay, well, connection.
Yep.
Dawni's house is always clean. Workability. You know, Dawni knows every one of her, 43 nieces and nephews' birthdays and spends a lot of time with them. Legacy.
Right.
What are you known for? Oh, Anthony's an actor. Right?
Yeah.
He's got to do things his way. So that's the second question. What are you known for?
Okay.
And my third question, I actually love this one. It's like, what do you care about too much?
Oh.
So,
Yeah.
quotes around that. Because people will be like, well, it's not too much for me. Okay, great. But what do you care about so much that maybe you've been shamed for it?
Oh. Okay.
Even by yourself?
Uh-huh.
what seems to matter to you more than it matters to anyone around you? Okay, so those are, actually, I'm going to throw in a bonus fourth question. What do you spend a lot of money on?
Okay.
And why?
And what? Right. Because
Right?
that'll open your eyes to a lot of things about what, yeah.
I mean, for Gideon, for growth being his number 3, the money he spends on courses, retreats, books. My house is a self-help library. Okay?
right.
Like, because growth.
Yeah.
Right? So look at what you spend a lot of money on and then ask yourself why. And go as deep as you can. So why do I value that? Why does that matter to me? Why does that bring meaning? And see what it comes down to.
Right.
Because ultimately, these 3 words, and there, it's a lot more to it than that. In the session I do, there's some more aspects, but ultimately, these 3 words, when you are living those, you will feel like your life is on purpose. You will feel meaning, like you have a meaningful life.
Yeah.
And the way I look at this realm is, let's be honest, it's a shit show, okay? There's so much beauty here, but it's a brutal place to be. I don't think anyone's going to really argue that,
Right.
And if it's not for you yet, at some point it's going to be. This is not the easiest place to be. I can't always make myself happy. I can't always make my world happy, but I can always make it meaningful.
Yes. Yeah.
And so there's a great gift here that it's funny because some people will get it and they'll start to see the applications of it. Other people are just sort of like, oh, okay, whatever. It's just one more thing. But for those people who really integrate it into their lives or into their marriages, like you're speaking to,
Yeah.
it can be a game changer.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we're moving forward because of the very things that you've taught us, and it's so helpful, and I'm so grateful that you've come up with all this idea, this innate drivers. I can't wait to read the book. And if they want to book a session with you again, they go to
DawniAngel.com.
Okay.
Yep, it's easy, and there's also a thing you can fill out if you are looking for like someone to come do a training at your business, or people will put together groups of friends and do a training.
Nice.
So my retreats are on there, my workshops are on there. It's a one-stop shop.
Woohoo!
And my book will be on there as soon as it's done.
All right. I can't wait for that. We'll definitely have you back on when the book is out. But and we'll have you back to talk about
The wound.
The wound is a big one. You do not want to miss that episode, let me tell you. Okay. Well, again, thank you for joining me.
Yes.
One more time, fourth time.
My
Is this
pleasure.
fourth or fifth? I don't know where
I'll
we're
come
at.
back as many times as you want.
Great.
This is my favorite podcast, so.
Awesome. We love having you.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. It really helps out my channel. And if you would be interested in working with me further, you can check out DawniAngel.com. I would love to come speak to your group, come to your business to do a training, be on your podcast, my personal favorite, or even work with you one-on-one.